Hi there, everybody. I'm Eric King. I wanted to bring you into a pretty special conversation dealing with the disappearance of Crystal Rogers and the latest in the court case as it moves its way through the court system. Shay McAlister here, who clearly needs no introduction to anybody, especially anybody, Shay, that's been following the story. And first of all, how you doing? It was a lot to ingest yesterday.
Yeah, and it ended up being a bit of a long day, but not a long hearing.
Yeah.
The hearing was very short. I mean, we're talking 20 minutes, all three of them together, in and out. You and I were just talking before we got started. You never know what to expect when you head to court in Bardstown.
You don't. So I said yesterday, but obviously this is going to live on the web for quite some time, so I'm referring to February the 8th. That was a hearing, Shay, where all three of the defendants were in court at the same time. So before we talk about that specifically, let's start with who the three defendants are.
Sure. So we are talking here about Brooks Houck, Crystal Rogers' former boyfriend, Steve Lawson, Brooks Houck's former employee, and then Joseph Lawson, who is Steve Lawson's son. All three men arrested in the death of Crystal Rogers, all arrested in connection to an incident from July the 3rd, 2015. That's exactly when she was reported missing. Brooks Houck is the only one charged with murder. The other two are charged with conspiracy to commit murder, meaning they had some hand in either planning or commission of the crime.
So yesterday was supposed to be what they call just a preliminary hearing. Those things are fairly flat typically. The reason that you and I were talking about what the potential for February the 8th might have been was because you were in the court for the arraignment of Brooks Houck, which is typically where they would come in and say, you are charged with the following crimes. And that's it. That turned into a whole melee of other things that the prosecutor brought up. I don't want you to go into that, but I'm just kind of setting the stage for why walking into what should be a regular court hearing in this particular case can be elevated to something vastly different.
You just don't know what to expect. I mean, in that first court hearing, tons of bombshells dropped. We were prepared for that yesterday. We didn't have the same level of bombshells. There were some new pieces of information that we got on some of these cases, but not the same level. You have to be prepared for anything down there, though. This case is so big, and the prosecutor is so strategic that he is dropping little pieces of information here and there.
So we're periodically seeing images of Brooks Houck there and the judge in the case. So let's talk about the February the 8th hearing. What exactly happened in that? I know all three were in there for the first time, which was a big deal in itself.
Certainly. We didn't know if that would be the case. So when we got there, we were ready to have three separate hearings throughout the afternoon. Each of these defendants has their own set of attorneys. They have their own charges. And right now they're three separate cases, but they were brought in one after another all together. All the attorneys were in there. And that was actually kind of a sign of what was to come, because right after they got started, the judge said, okay, Commonwealth's Attorney Shane Young, do you intend to try these men all together in one case? And he said yes. He'll be filing a motion for one trial. Of course, it's not up to him, it's up to the judge, and the judge already noted there'll likely be some objections. Brian Butler, who represents Brooks Houck, said, yes, I will be objecting to that. He does not want Brooks Houck tried with the Lawsons. We'll see what the judge decides. That will be an entirely separate hearing.
You talked about some of the evidence that was brought in, not the specific evidence itself, but the amount of it, a terabyte, more than a terabyte actually, of evidence. That by itself lends one to believe that it's going to take a long time for this to actually get to a trial.
And they set a trial date. They set it for February the 10th, 2025.
Next year.
Almost a year to the day from right now. But will they meet that? It's hard to tell. We talked to some former prosecutors who act as our experts on this, who said with a terabyte of evidence, even a year is almost not enough time to get through all of that evidence and then build a case for a defense. And so it's likely that trial date will get pushed back. Interestingly, this is one of the things that stood out to me, Eric, is the prosecutor was painting a picture for why he thinks February is an appropriate timeline. He said when he was given this case, he spent 6 months going through the case file in its entirety, and that included Tommy Ballard and Jason Ellis. And I think that's so interesting because we've never heard the prosecutor point to there being one case file for Crystal, Tommy, and Jason.
Because everybody has been asking from the very beginning. Jason Ellis was the first of the cases. Are they connected? So it sounds like what the prosecutor was laying out yesterday on some level implied that there is some level of investigative relationship.
Absolutely. And he didn't elaborate. There was no follow-up. Obviously, we're not allowed to raise our hands and ask any questions in the courtroom. But that really stood out to me because I've never heard them throw Jason in there. Tommy and Crystal, yes. And at that first court arraignment, we heard that they were investigating Brooks' brother, Nick, in connection to Tommy's death. So we've had some tidbits there. Never Jason, though. So that's very interesting. And the fact that all of the evidence is in one file for the 3 deaths, that was the first time we've heard that, and that really stood out.
So prosecutors show up to these types of hearings with a presentation prepared to argue their points. Defense attorneys are typically on some level aware of what's going to be brought up, but they have to then, in real time, ingest that information and defend their respective clients. Was there anything that you noticed from the defense attorneys that pushed back against the prosecutor or gave you any reason to think what was that?
Yes, okay, so this was another interesting tidbit. The only motion heard yesterday, and it's typically a motion when you get that back and forth. A motion is either the prosecution or the defense is asking for the judge to do something, to exclude that evidence, to lower a bond, to get a continuance on the case, push it down the road, something like that. And they'll present their evidence, why they want that, and then the other side has a chance to rebuttal. The only motion that we heard yesterday was for Joseph Lawson's bond. He's currently at $500,000, and his team of defense attorneys wants him down to $50,000 and home incarceration. So they said, obviously, he's a paraplegic. He is not a danger to community. He will show up to court. We think that it's fair and safe for him to just be released on home incarceration. Well, the Commonwealth was really quickly to say, hold on a second. Let's not say that this man isn't a danger. He's a convicted felon, multiple felonies. He is currently serving time on a different conviction in a Kentucky state prison. And more than any of that, they pointed out that when he found out he was being investigated, which I don't know when this was, but when he found out that state police were looking at him in connection to Crystal, we're told that he was texting and calling friends and family, asking them to be part of a cover-up story to give him an alibi for the weekend she went missing.
So the implication that since someone does not necessarily have use of their legs does not make them on some level a flight risk.
Right. And the judge took both sides into consideration and told us he won't be making a decision until early next week.
And if you look back at this case, I mean, Brooks Houck made arguments that his bond should be lowered significantly as well, and the judge didn't go for that.
And Brooks Houck's bond is shockingly high, stunningly high. His defense attorney has been the attorney on some of Louisville's most high-profile murder cases, and he said even then the highest bond he's ever had for one of his clients was $2 million,
right.
And that was for someone charged with multiple murders. Here we have Brooks Houck charged with 1 murder and $10 million, but that stuck, and that didn't stick just with our judge. That went up to the Kentucky
Right.
Appeals Court. They kept it that way. They asked for the judge to be dismissed from this case. Supreme Court said no, he'll stay on for now. So at this point, it looks like Brooks Houck is staying in on that high bond.
So in a second, I want to talk about kind of the air in the courtroom, what it was like to be in there and who was in there. But before we move to that point, have we closed all the loops on what happened technically in the trial yesterday? We know the court date has been set. We know the evidence is what it is. And we know that they're, at least for now, being tried together.
I think so. I think those are the 3 big takeaways. We're looking at February, possibly all 3 together, if they can get through a mountain of evidence.
So when the 3 defendants came in, I know that there were some questions whether or not that would be a reality of them coming in at the same time. What was the air in the courtroom?
Well, this was the first time that we have seen almost equal parts Houck family and friends and Ballard family and friends. They were on opposite sides of the courtroom, and both sides filled multiple rows, which was very interesting. Crystal Rogers' family always has a strong presence. She always has her mother, her grandparents, her brother and sister, her children. She always has a lot of community support. We don't always see that from the Houck family, but we did yesterday. And we had some images of Brooks Houck in particular almost smiling when he got to his seat, after seeing his family and seeing some of those people who were there to support him. Then you saw some images just now of Sherry where you can see she definitely looks unhappy, I think, seeing those smiles.
So there's reporting and then there's stellar reporting. Obviously, you are in the stellar reporting category on this. And I know you won't come out and say that yourself, but it's true. And I think part of that isn't just because of the skill in which you handle this story, but you're on some level, you have a relationship that you have managed, a professional relationship that you've managed to establish with the Ballard family in particular. Was there an opportunity for you to speak with Sherry Ballard or anybody in the Ballard family to get some sort of, just take the temperature of how they're feeling after this hearing?
Sure. So I was able to talk to them before we went in. Sherry in particular said that she was feeling good. You know, I think there's nerves every time she gets ready to walk into one of these hearings. She doesn't know what she's about to hear, much like us. You know, we don't know which name is about to be dropped and which case is about to be brought up. But I think she was feeling confident. And I think for her, having a trial date is a really good feeling. It's that final, okay, there is some light at the end of the tunnel here. Of course, she still has her husband's case. I think that's always lingering. But she seemed to be feeling good. Afterwards, I talked to Crystal's grandparents, Till and Betty Ballard. And for them, I think it was mixed emotions seeing Brooks Houck in person for the first time since he was arrested. Till has told me over the years, over the last 9 years, that one of the worst parts about living in Bardstown was seeing Brooks Houck out on the road. And they're both in the construction business. He recognized Brooks' car. He would see him at the Home Depot, at the grocery store, at a construction site. And that really bothered him. And over these last several months, he's not seeing him anymore. You know, this is the first time he's seen him. And he's in a black and white jumpsuit and he's shackled. And I think for Till, that was a big relief and almost a rewarding moment.
There was a gentleman you interviewed, and it may have been one of the grandparents, you may have just spoken about him, but there was a specific part in the interview where the gentleman said, if you think these three are it, you are wrong. I would give you whatever I have in my pocket, bet you that there are more people involved. Did that strike you as something new, or did that strike you as something that they've been saying consistently?
I think that's the common belief, and that's actually, he's a close family friend of the Ballards. All of the Ballards have been instructed not to speak on camera, period. And it's actually gone even further. At first it was just Sherry, now detectives and prosecutors have asked the grandparents not to speak, the brother and sister not to speak. So we're, you know, now a family friend is kind of as close as we can get to share that voice with the audience. And that's who Willie is, who we talked to yesterday. He was really expressing what we've heard everyone say, which is that they do think more people are involved. They do think more arrests are coming. When, how, who, I think those are not completely known, but that is a strong belief in the family.
What kind of time frame or timeline are we looking at now? We know the court date has been set for next year, but we've also been involved in enough court trials to know that there are benchmarks that happen before that. Were you left with any kind of concrete information on what's next? I know the one thing that's up in the air is the bond reduction request, but are there any other mile markers or benchmarks, things that are coming up that we should keep our eye on?
Sure. So the next court date is actually March the 21st. It's a status conference. And what that'll be about is all attorneys and the prosecutor coming together to confirm that all of the evidence has been shared. March 15th, I think, is when the prosecutor had promised to have all of the evidence turned over, discovery, as they call it. And so 1 week later, March 21st, they're just going to confirm that that has happened and go from there. Status conference, sometimes defendants don't even come to those.
Yep.
It's, you know, oftentimes it's even in a back room, it's just the attorneys. They're just saying, okay, you have it, you have it, you have it, check. All right, let's set the next hearing. So we don't anticipate much to happen there. That can change if there's motions filed, and we are expecting motions. We're expecting a motion to combine the cases from the prosecutor. We're expecting objection from Brian Butler on that. We're expecting a motion to change the venue out of Nelson County, and I think everyone will probably agree to that. The question there, can you go anywhere
Where
in
would you
Kentucky?
go?
Right?
That's why those chains of venues, and attorneys will tell you this too, they're a hard thing to ask for on something major, because even if you get out of the county or the city, you're going to go where? You know,
It's tough right here in Kentucky because Crystal's case is not just big in Nelson County or in Louisville.
well, it's not just big in Kentucky either.
Right.
You know?
It's, I mean, I think that they're going to have a tough time finding a location, and there's options. You know, sometimes they'll bring in a jury from somewhere else.
Right.
They'll move everyone down there. We'll have to see which way they go on that. I don't know. The attorney did say he's going to do his research. He's going to actually have a suggestion on where to move it when he does file that motion.
So this will be the last question that I ask you, Shay, and I don't even really know if it's an answerable question. But anytime we cover court or crime of any kind, there's always this idea that I'm fighting for justice. I want justice at the end of this. But justice always seems to be like a moving target. It means different things to different people. Is there justice for the Ballard family? And if so, what does that look like?
You know, when I ask them about that, I think for them, it is actually quite simple. It's the people responsible for taking their loved ones are paying a price. I think for the last 9 years, they've watched a man who was named as the main suspect in Crystal's disappearance walk around free, have successful businesses and relationships. And I think that's been so incredibly painful for them. So now, when they look at where do we go from here and when do we feel good about this, it's when there's been accountability, when people are having to pay for the crimes committed. And of course, that would come from a trial and a conviction. And so that's, I think, the thing that scares Sherry most is if they don't get that, you know, you've only got one chance.
That's it. Shay, thank you for talking and kind of giving us a deep dive into what's going on. But just thank you for the stellar reporting. It's great to be in the newsroom watching you work. And it's great to be part of a team that's leading the coverage behind you. WHAS11.com, you can find all the information, the timelines. Our digital crew's done a fantastic job really breaking out the real-time reporting that was happening online during the hearing, and that's certainly going to continue. Remember to download the free WHAS 11 app. You can get it wherever you get your app stores. Again, I can't say it enough that it's free. We'll push you real alerts in real time whenever you need them. Again, Shay, thank you.
Thanks, Eric.